The wind whispered across the broken landscape of New Terra, carrying dust that once held the dreams of millions. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the edge of what had once been a thriving research complex, her weathered hands clutching a damaged data pad. Around her, the remnants of human civilization stretched out like a fading memory, scattered settlements, half-collapsed structures, and the rusted skeletons of abandoned starships. 15 years had passed since the Galactic Conquests had nearly wiped humanity from existence. What began as a simple territorial dispute had escalated into a devastating war that had reduced human colonies to ash and scattered the survivors across a handful of barely habitable worlds. New Terra was humanity's last real stronghold, a testament to their stubborn refusal to surrender. Elena's eyes scanned the horizon, her mind replaying the final moments of the Great Collapse. The alien fleet had been overwhelming. Massive ships that dwarfed human vessels, weapons technology so advanced it seemed like magic. They had systematically dismantled human defenses, colony after colony falling like dominoes. Most of humanity's leadership had been killed in the initial strikes, leaving behind a fractured, desperate remnant. The research complex around her told a story of desperate survival. Makeshift living quarters had been constructed from the ruins of advanced laboratories. Solder collectors cobbled together from salvaged equipment provided minimal power. Children played between the remnants of scientific equipment, their laughter a stark contrast to the desolation surrounding them. A soft beep from her data pad interrupted her thoughts. Elena's fingers, calloused from years of manual labor and scientific work, swiped across the screen. Most of the device's functions had long since failed, but she kept it as a reminder of what humanity had lost, and what might still be recovered. Something caught her eye. A fragment of data, barely visible, nestled deep within a corrupted file system. Most would have dismissed it as random noise, but Elena had spent years learning to find meaning in the smallest details. Her scientific training, honed through years of survival and adaptation, saw patterns where others saw only static. "Carlos," she called out, her voice carrying across the settlement. A young technician emerged from a nearby shelter, his eyes alert and curious. At 25, Carlos represented the first generation born entirely after the Great Collapse, a generation that knew only survival and hope. "Take a look at this," Elena said, holding out the data pad. Carlos moved closer, his fingers tracing the encrypted fragments with a practiced touch. Unlike the previous generation, these young survivors had been forced to become technical generalists. Every skill was crucial, every piece of knowledge a potential lifeline. The encryption was unlike anything they had seen before. Layers of alien computational language intertwined with fragments of human research data. It was as if someone had deliberately hidden something. A message, a technology, perhaps even a weapon, deep within the archives. "This doesn't match any known Concordance communication protocols," Carlos muttered, his fingers dancing across the screen. "And it's definitely not standard human encryption either." Elena felt a familiar spark of excitement, the same feeling that had driven her scientific career before the war. Discovery, possibility, hope. The settlement around them continued its daily rhythm. Children gathered water from reclamation tanks. Engineers repaired worn equipment. Hydroponics gardens provided carefully rationed nutrition. Humanity might be reduced, but they were far from defeated. As the twin suns of New Terra began to set, casting long shadows across the broken landscape, Elena knew something significant was about to change. The encrypted data fragment was more than just information. It was a promise, a hint that humanity's story was far from over. "We're going to need the entire research team," she told Carlos, "and we'll need to work carefully. Whatever this is, someone went to extraordinary lengths to hide it." Carlos nodded, understanding the unspoken message. In their world, information was survival, and survival was everything. The night descended on New Terra, but for the first time in years, a sense of anticipation replaced the usual atmosphere of desperate survival. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. The laboratory hummed with an intensity that felt almost alive. Soft blue light from holographic displays cast long shadows across Elena's face as she studied the genetic sequence dancing before her eyes. What had begun as a curious fragment of encrypted data had transformed into something far more extraordinary, a discovery that could change everything for humanity. Carlos stood beside her, his fingers moving across the interface with practiced precision. They had spent weeks decrypting the mysterious data, working in shifts that blended day and night into an endless cycle of hope and frustration. The research complex had become a crucible of human determination, every surviving scientist and technician contributing their skills to unravel the mystery. "Look at this," Elena muttered, her voice a mix of excitement and disbelief. The genetic sequence before them defied everything humanity knew about biological adaptation. Most species had relatively static genetic structures, with minor variations occurring over thousands of generations. But this sequence suggested something radical, a genetic framework that could actively modify itself in response to environmental challenges. The implications were staggering. Where other species required generations to adapt to new environments, this genetic structure suggested humans could potentially modify their own biology in real time. It was more than evolution. It was active, immediate transformation. Dr. Maria Santos, the head of xenobiology, leaned in closer, her weathered face, marked by years of survival and scientific pursuit, showed a mixture of skepticism and growing wonder. "This isn't just adaptation," she said softly. "This is something entirely different." Outside the laboratory, New Terra's harsh environment continued its relentless assault. Solar radiation scorched the rocky terrain. Minimal atmosphere made every breath a carefully managed resource. Humanity's survival here had already been a testament to human resilience, but this discovery suggested they were capable of so much more. Carlos pulled up additional data layers, revealing complex interaction patterns within the genetic sequence. "It's like a living computer," he explained, "but organic. Each genetic segment can potentially reconfigure itself based on external stimuli." The research team worked with a combination of excitement and methodical precision. They understood the stakes. Humanity was not just studying a scientific curiosity. They were examining a potential lifeline for their entire species. Elena remembered the stories told by the older generation, tales of the war that had nearly destroyed humanity. The Galactic Conquests had viewed humans as a primitive, easily conquered species. Their massive ships and advanced technologies had seemed insurmountable. Colony after colony had fallen, reduced to radioactive dust and scattered memories. But this genetic sequence told a different story. It suggested that humanity's true strength was not in their current technology, but in their fundamental biological potential. "We need to run more tests," Maria cautioned. Scientific skepticism ran deep in their community. Years of survival had taught them to question everything, to verify each discovery multiple times. The next weeks became a blur of experiments. They used every piece of salvaged equipment, every computational resource they possessed. Genetic samples were carefully cultivated, exposed to various environmental stressors. The results consistently defied scientific understanding. A plant sample, modified with fragments of the discovered genetic sequence, demonstrated remarkable resilience. Radiation levels that would have killed standard organisms became mere background noise. Temperature variations that should have caused cellular breakdown were instead integrated and neutralized. "It's not just adaptation," Elena said during one late-night briefing. "It's transformation. Our genetic structure doesn't just respond to challenges, it actively learns from them." The implications extended far beyond biological research. If humans could modify their genetic structure this rapidly, what might that mean for technological integration? For survival in hostile environments? For their potential conflict with the Galactic Conquests? Carlos developed specialized computational models to simulate potential genetic configurations. Each simulation revealed new layers of complexity. The genetic sequence was not just a static blueprint, it was a dynamic, intelligent system. As the twin suns of New Terra set, casting long shadows across the research complex. The team understood they were standing at the precipice of something monumental. This was more than a scientific discovery. This was humanity's potential, encoded in their very DNA. "We're going to need to be careful," Maria warned. "If this gets out to the wrong people, it could change everything." Elena nodded, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the holographic displays. Something extraordinary was taking shape, a potential future where humanity was no longer just a species fighting for survival, but a dynamic, transformative force in the galaxy. The communication hub was a marvel of improvised engineering. Buried deep beneath the surface of New Terra, it hummed with carefully salvaged equipment that had been modified beyond recognition. Elena Rodriguez stood beside Carlos, watching as a team of young technicians worked with a precision that would have been impossible just months ago. Their genetic research had unlocked more than biological potential. It had revealed a path to technological integration that defied everything the Galactic Conquests understood about human capabilities. Marcus Chen, head of communications and intelligence, adjusted a complex array of signal interceptors. His fingers moved with the grace of a musician, each touch carefully calibrated to penetrate the most secure alien communication networks. Around him, a team of specialists worked in near-perfect silence, their focus absolute. "We're in," Marcus whispered, a hint of triumph in his voice. The first infiltration was more of a probe than an attack. Tiny fragments of code, developed using the insights from their genetic research, began to weave through the Concordance's communication infrastructure. It was unlike any traditional cyber attack. These were adaptive algorithms that learned and transformed with each interaction, mimicking the genetic flexibility they had discovered in human DNA. Elena watched the holographic displays, her breath caught in her throat. Years of survival had taught humanity the value of patience, of waiting for the perfect moment. The Concordance believed humans were a defeated species, confined to a few barely habitable worlds. They had no idea what was coming. The first signs of successful infiltration were subtle. Small discrepancies in fleet coordination reports, momentary glitches in long-range communication systems. Nothing that would immediately raise alarm, but enough to create confusion and doubt. Carlos pulled up a series of data streams, his eyes scanning rapid-fire information. "Look," he said, pointing to a series of mapped communication routes. "They're not even aware we're here." The resistance had evolved from a desperate survival strategy to something far more sophisticated. Each piece of salvaged technology was now a weapon. Each fragment of scientific understanding became a tool of potential liberation. Maria Santos entered the communication hub, her presence commanding immediate respect. Years of survival had hardened her, but her eyes still held a spark of scientific curiosity. "The genetic adaptations we've discovered," she said, "they're not just biological. They're a way of thinking." Marcus nodded, understanding the deeper implication. Humanity's true strength was not in their current technology, but in their ability to understand, adapt, and transform. Where the Concordance saw rigid systems, humans saw opportunities for innovation. Their first real test came unexpectedly. The Concordance Deep Space Monitoring Station suddenly experienced a series of mysterious system failures. Communication logs became scrambled. Sensor arrays reported impossible readings. To any outside observer, it would look like a standard technical malfunction. But it was something far more deliberate. Precision is key, Elena reminded the team. Their goal was not destruction, but disruption. Create doubt. Introduce uncertainty. Show the Concordance that humanity was far from defeated. The communication hub worked like a living organism. Algorithms adapted in real time, learning from each interaction with alien systems. It was a digital manifestation of the genetic research they had uncovered. Flexible, intelligent, transformative. As the twin suns of New Terra cast long shadows across the underground facility, the team continued their silent warfare. Each intercepted communication, each manipulated data stream was a small victory, a promise of what was to come. Marcus highlighted a series of fleet movement reports on the main display. "They're repositioning resources," he said. "But they don't realize why." The Resistance was playing a game of inches, small interventions that would create massive strategic complications for the Concordance. Humanity had learned that survival was not about overwhelming force, but about intelligent adaptation. By midnight, they had successfully infiltrated 3 major communication networks, not with violence, but with intelligence, with an understanding of systems that went beyond traditional warfare. "We're just getting started," Carlos said, a rare smile crossing his face. Belina looked at the team, survivors, scientists, warriors all. They represented humanity's true strength, not in muscles or weaponry, but in their ability to learn, to adapt, to transform. The Concordance had no idea what was coming, and that was exactly how they wanted it. The Concordance war room erupted in chaos. Holographic displays flickered with increasingly bizarre reports from across their controlled sectors. Admiral Krell, a veteran of 100 military campaigns, slammed his 6-fingered hand against the communication console. "Explain these anomalies," he demanded, his translucent skin shifting colors in response to his rising frustration. The communication specialist, a young Viridian analyst, struggled to maintain composure. "Sir, we're detecting systematic disruptions across multiple communication networks, but there's no consistent pattern of attack. It's as if..." "As if what?" Krell interrupted, his voice a low growl that reverberated through the command chamber. "As if the systems are adapting," the analyst finished, her voice barely a whisper. Thousands of light-years away on New Terra, Elena Rodriguez watched the first waves of the Concordance response unfold. The massive alien fleet was beginning to move, their initial confusion giving way to a coordinated military mobilization that had crushed countless civilizations before. "They're predictable," Carlos muttered, studying the holographic representations of fleet movements. "Exactly like we anticipated." The Concordance response was brutal and comprehensive. Entire star systems would be scanned. Communication networks would be isolated. Any hint of resistance would be methodically eliminated. It was the same strategy that had nearly wiped out humanity 15 years earlier. But this time was different. Maria Santos approached the main strategy table, her eyes reflecting a combination of scientific calculation and strategic insight. "Our infiltration was never about direct confrontation," she explained to the gathered resistance leaders. "We're introducing uncertainty, creating gaps in their understanding." Marcus Chen pulled up a series of intercepted communication logs. Each one showed subtle manipulations, fleet orders slightly misaligned, navigation coordinates marginally skewed, communication protocols subtly disrupted. To an outside observer, they might look like minor technical glitches, but they were calculated precision. The first Concordance scout ships arrived in the New Terra sector, their massive hulls blocking out starlight. Energy signatures charged, weapons systems primed. They expected to find a broken, defeated human settlement, easy prey for a final, decisive strike. Instead, they found something entirely unexpected. Sensor readings became increasingly erratic. Communication channels experienced unexplained interference. Navigation systems reported impossible gravitational anomalies. It was as if the very space around the human colony was alive. "They're using our genetic research," Elena explained to the resistance commanders, "not just as a biological adaptation, but as a fundamental approach to warfare. We're not fighting. We're transforming the very rules of engagement." The Concordance fleet began to experience systematic failures, not destructive attacks, but persistent, intelligent disruptions. A navigation system would momentarily lose calibration. A weapons targeting would slightly misalign. Communication protocols would experience brief, unexplainable interruptions. Admiral Krell watched in growing frustration as his carefully planned assault began to unravel. These were not the actions of a defeated species. These were the movements of something far more dangerous, an intelligent adaptation. On New Terra, The resistance worked with a calm precision. Each team member understood their role. Carlos managed the communication disruptions. Maria analyzed the biological and technological interactions. Marcus coordinated the strategic overview, and Elena provided the overarching vision. They were not just fighting. They were demonstrating a fundamental truth about humanity: the ability to transform. As the Concordance fleet continued its approach, strange phenomena began to manifest. Sensor readings suggested impossible physics. Communication logs revealed contradictory information. It was as if the very fabric of space was responding to human presence. "They don't understand," Marcus said quietly. "We're not trying to defeat them. We're showing them something far more important." The first wave of Concordance ships began to experience total system failures, not through traditional electronic warfare, but through something far more sophisticated: an intelligent, adaptive response that seemed to anticipate and neutralize their every move. Elena watched the holographic displays, a slight smile crossing her face. The Concordance believed they were launching an overwhelming assault. They had no idea they were walking into a transformation. The research complex hummed with an energy that felt almost alive. Holographic displays danced with cascading data streams, each line of code a testament to humanity's extraordinary transformation. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a technological revolution that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about human potential. Dr. Maria Santos approached a complex neurological interface, her fingers moving with a precision born of years of survival and scientific innovation. "The adaptive algorithms are reaching a new level of integration," she said, her voice a mixture of wonder and scientific caution. Carlos watched as multiple systems began to synchronize in ways that seemed impossible just months earlier. What had started as desperate survival was now becoming something far more profound. Humanity was not just adapting to technology, they were becoming one with it. The genetic research they had uncovered was more than a biological breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligence could function. Where other species saw technology as a tool, humans were beginning to understand it as an extension of consciousness itself. Scattered across the research complex, teams of scientists and technicians worked on projects that would have seemed like pure science fiction mere months ago. A group near the Quantum Computing Center was developing adaptive communication protocols that could reshape themselves in real time. Another team worked on biological interfaces that blended organic intelligence with computational systems. Marcus Chen entered the main laboratory, bringing with him a set of intercepted Concordance communication logs. "They're completely baffled," he reported, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Our technological adaptations are creating cascading uncertainties in their systems." The true genius of their approach was its subtlety. They weren't trying to destroy the Concordance's technology. They were demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to intelligence and adaptation. Elena pulled up a holographic display, showing the intricate connections between their genetic research and technological development. Each line represented a breakthrough, a moment where human potential transcended previous limitations. The display was less a technical diagram and more a living, breathing map of innovation. "It's not about beating their technology," she explained to the gathered researchers. "It's about showing a different way of understanding technology itself." The complex around them told the story of human resilience. Salvaged equipment from a dozen different alien technologies had been repurposed, reimagined, transformed. Nothing was wasted. Everything was an opportunity for innovation. A young researcher named Lucia approached with a new set of computational models. "Look at this," she said, her excitement barely contained. The holographic display showed how their adaptive algorithms could potentially interface with virtually any technological system, learning and transforming with each interaction. Maria studied the models carefully. "We're not just creating new technology," she said softly. "We're demonstrating a new form of intelligence." The Concordance had always viewed technology as a static thing, a set of tools to be controlled and managed. Humans were showing something entirely different. Technology as a living, adaptive system. Intelligence as a fluid, transformative process. Carlos worked on a series of quantum communication protocols that seemed to bend the very rules of information transfer. Signals that could exist in multiple states simultaneously. Communication that was less about sending information and more about creating shared understanding. Outside the research complex, New Terra's harsh environment continued its relentless assault. Solar radiation, minimal atmosphere, conditions that would have destroyed most civilizations, but humans had turned these challenges into opportunities for growth. Marcus brought up a series of Concordance fleet movement reports. They're becoming more erratic, he noted. The human resistance wasn't fighting a traditional war. They were introducing a fundamental uncertainty into the Concordance's understanding of technology and intelligence. Alina watched the displays, understanding the deeper implications of their work. This was more than a technological breakthrough. This was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. As the twin suns of New Terra began to set, casting long shadows across the research complex, the team continued their work. Each moment was a step toward something extraordinary, a future where humanity was not just a surviving species, but a transformative force in the galaxy. "We're just getting started," Carlos said, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the holographic displays. The technological symphony was beginning, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The diplomatic chamber hung in absolute silence. Representatives from 12 different alien species stared in stunned disbelief at the human delegation. Alina Rodriguez stood at the center, her presence radiating a quiet confidence that seemed to defy everything they understood about humanity. The Concordance had demanded this hearing, a final opportunity to understand how a species they had nearly destroyed had suddenly become an unpredictable force in the galaxy. What they discovered was far more terrifying than any military threat. Admiral Krell, his translucent skin shifting through shades of gray and blue, broke the silence. "Explain," he demanded, his multiple eyes focusing with an intensity that had intimidated countless civilizations. Maria Santos stepped forward, her presentation already loaded into the chamber's advanced holographic systems. The display began to show a complex narrative, not of military might, but of adaptive potential. "Humanity is not a species," she began, her voice calm and measured. "We are a process of continuous transformation." The holographic display shifted, revealing layers of genetic and technological research. Each image demonstrated how humans had transformed seemingly insurmountable challenges into opportunities for growth. Environments that should have been fatal became laboratories of adaptation. Technological limitations became gateways to innovation. Carlos managed the technical aspects of the presentation, his fingers moving with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. Each data point told a story of human potential, not as a linear progression, but as a dynamic fluid system of continuous learning. The alien representatives watched in growing unease. The Concordance had built its galactic dominance on predictability, on systems that could be controlled, managed, contained. Humanity represented something entirely different, an intelligence that refused to be categorized or confined. Marcus Chen revealed the most shocking aspect of their research. The human approach to intelligence was fundamentally different from any known species. Where others saw technology and biology as separate domains, humans understood them as interconnected, adaptive systems. "We are not trying to conquer," Alina explained, her words cutting through the diplomatic tension. "We are demonstrating a different way of existing in the universe." The diplomatic chamber became a battlefield of understanding. Each alien representative struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. Humanity was not presenting a military strategy. They were offering a fundamental reimagining of intelligence itself. Lucia, one of the younger researchers, presented a series of adaptive communication protocols, systems that could reshape themselves in real time, learning and transforming with each interaction. The alien representatives watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. Admiral Krell's skin began to pulse with complex color patterns, a sign of deep internal conflict. The human delegation was not asking for recognition or permission. They were simply showing what was possible. Maria's presentation continued, revealing how human genetic research had transformed their understanding of adaptation. Each challenge became an opportunity, each limitation a chance for growth. The very concept of survival had been reimagined. "We are not a fixed point," Alina said, her words carefully chosen. "We are a continuous process of becoming." The diplomatic chamber felt like a crucible of possibility. The alien representatives began to understand something profound. Humanity represented a fundamental threat not through violence, but through a radical approach to intelligence and adaptation. Carlos demonstrated adaptive technologies that could interface with virtually any existing system. Communication protocols that defied traditional understanding. Technological interfaces that learned and transformed with each interaction. Marcus revealed the strategic implications. Humanity was not interested in territorial conquest. They were offering a new way of understanding existence itself, an approach to intelligence that was fluid, dynamic, transformative. As the presentation concluded, the alien representatives sat in stunned silence. They had come expecting to understand a defeated species. Instead, they had witnessed a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. Alina looked across the chamber, understanding the deeper significance of their demonstration. This was more than a diplomatic meeting. This was a moment of galactic transformation. "We are not here to fight," she said finally. "We are here to show what is possible." The diplomatic chamber hung in a silence that spoke volumes. The galaxy would never be the same. The space between star systems erupted in a symphony of impossible light. Concordance warships, massive and seemingly invincible, converged on the human-controlled sector with an overwhelming force that had crushed 1,000 civilizations before. Alina Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the adaptive command vessel, her eyes scanning multiple holographic displays that seemed to breathe and shift with living intelligence. Around her, the ship's systems responded to unspoken commands, a perfect fusion of human consciousness and technological potential. "Incoming fleet," Marcus Chen announced, his voice calm despite the approaching storm. "Concordance Battle Group, 13 primary vessels, approximately 200 support craft." Carlos worked at a complex interface, his fingers dancing across adaptive communication nodes. The ship around them was unlike any vessel in known space, less a machine and more a living organism that responded to human intention. The Concordance fleet approached with mathematical precision. Each ship was a marvel of technological engineering. Weapon systems that could destroy entire planetary surfaces. Shield technologies that had rendered previous resistance movements extinct in moments. They'd moved with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat. They had no idea what was coming. Maria Santos monitored the biological-technological interface, her expertise bridging the gap between human adaptation and technological potential. "They're still operating on traditional combat protocols," she said, a hint of something between amusement and pity in her voice. The first wave of Concordance attacks began. Energy weapons that could slice through planetary crusts. Quantum disruption fields that should have disabled any defensive systems. Attacks that had ended conflicts before they could truly begin. But this was different. The human vessel didn't just defend. It transformed. Shield systems that didn't just block incoming attacks but studied them, absorbed them, learned from them. Where a traditional ship would have been destroyed, this vessel began to reshape its own molecular structure, adapting to each incoming threat in milliseconds. Admiral Krell watched from the Concordance flagship, his multiple eyes struggling to comprehend what was happening. The human vessel wasn't just surviving. It was evolving. "Impossible," he muttered, his translucent skin shifting through colors of confusion and growing terror. Alina understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't about winning a battle. This was about demonstrating a fundamental truth about intelligence and adaptation. Weapon systems on the Concordance ships began to experience strange malfunctions. Not destructive failures, but subtle manipulations. A targeting system would momentarily lose calibration. A shield generator would briefly misalign. Communication protocols would experience unexplainable interruptions. It was as if the very fabric of technological reality was becoming fluid. Carlos pulled up a display showing the adaptive responses. Each incoming attack became an opportunity for learning. Each aggressive movement was absorbed, understood, transformed. "They're teaching us," Maria observed, watching the complex interactions between the human vessel and the attacking fleet. The battle became something beyond traditional warfare. The human ship didn't just defend or attack. It demonstrated a new way of existing in the universe. Intelligence as a fluid, adaptive process. Concordance support craft began to experience systemic failures, not through traditional electronic warfare, but through something far more sophisticated. An intelligent response that seemed to anticipate and neutralize their every move. Marcus tracked the strategic implications. "They're not just losing," he said quietly. "They're being shown the limitations of their own understanding." The human vessel moved with a grace that defied traditional physics. It wasn't just a ship. It was a living demonstration of human potential. As the confrontation reached its peak, something extraordinary happened. The adaptive vessel began to broadcast. Not a traditional communication, but a complex series of quantum-entangled information packets that carried something beyond mere data. A fundamental reimagining of intelligence itself. Admiral Krell watched in growing horror as his entire fleet began to experience systemic transformation. Not destruction. Something far more terrifying. Understanding. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of this cosmic moment of revelation. They weren't just fighting a battle. They were showing the galaxy a new way of existing. As the last Concordance ships began to experience total systemic transformation, one thing became clear. Humanity was no longer just a species. They were a process of continuous becoming. The Galactic Conference Chamber was unlike anything seen before. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered, not as conquerors or competitors, but as curious participants in a new understanding of existence. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, a living embodiment of humanity's transformative journey. The aftermath of the final confrontation had changed everything. The Concordance was no longer a hierarchy of dominant species, but a collaborative network of potential, and humanity had become its catalyst. Maria Santos approached the central podium, her presentation ready to reveal the next phase of galactic cooperation. "We are not here to replace," she began, her voice carrying across the massive chamber. "We are here to demonstrate a new way of understanding." Carlos managed the complex holographic displays, each image a testament to the collaborative potential they had discovered. Technological interfaces that could adapt, communication systems that learned, biological frameworks that transformed in real time. The alien representatives listened with a mixture of wonder and trepidation. What humanity offered was not a new form of conquest, but a radical reimagining of collective intelligence. Marcus Chen revealed the first collaborative projects. Adaptive medical technologies that could respond to the unique biological needs of multiple species. Communication protocols that bridged fundamental differences in perception and understanding. Technological interfaces that celebrated diversity rather than demanding uniformity. Elena understood the deeper significance of this moment. They were not offering a solution, but a process, a way of existing that celebrated continuous adaptation and mutual growth. The chamber was filled with representatives from species that had once been bitter enemies. Civilizations that had fought wars spanning thousands of years now sat together, united by a new understanding of potential. Lucia, one of the younger researchers, demonstrated adaptive education systems, learning frameworks that could reshape themselves to the unique cognitive patterns of different species. Not a single approach, but a living, breathing system of mutual understanding. The Concordance had been transformed from a hierarchical system of control to a network of collaborative potential. Each species was invited to contribute, to learn, to grow. Maria's presentation continued, revealing how human research had opened new pathways of understanding. Technological development was no longer about dominance, but about mutual exploration. Scientific research became a collaborative process of continuous discovery. Carlos showed adaptive terraforming technologies that could transform hostile environments into living ecosystems. Technologies that didn't impose a single solution, but responded to the unique characteristics of each planetary system. The diplomatic chamber became a crucible of possibility. Species that had been isolated for millennia began to see new pathways of communication and cooperation. Marcus revealed strategies for conflict resolution that went beyond traditional diplomatic approaches. Systems that could understand the deeper motivations behind conflict, creating pathways for mutual understanding rather than confrontation. Elena looked across the chamber, understanding that this was more than a diplomatic meeting. This was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent species could interact. The human approach was not about replacing existing systems, but about introducing a new way of thinking. Intelligence as a fluid, adaptive process. Cooperation as a continuous journey of mutual discovery. Lucia demonstrated adaptive resource-sharing technologies, systems that could respond to the unique needs of different species, creating pathways of mutual support that went beyond traditional economic models. The representatives from different species began to see themselves not as separate entities, but as part of a larger, interconnected system of potential. Maria's final presentation revealed the most profound insight. Humanity was not offering a solution, but a process. A way of existing that celebrated continuous adaptation, mutual understanding, and collective growth. Carlos showed how their adaptive technologies could help species overcome historical conflicts, create new pathways of communication, and explore the universe together. Marcus demonstrated diplomatic frameworks that didn't seek to eliminate differences, but to celebrate them. To create systems of mutual understanding that respected the unique characteristics of each species. Elena understood that this was humanity's true contribution. Not a technology, not a military victory, but a new way of understanding collective potential. As the conference concluded, something extraordinary had happened. The galaxy was no longer a place of competition and conflict. It had become a living network of mutual exploration and continuous growth. Humanity had transformed from a species on the brink of extinction to the catalyst of a new galactic understanding. The journey was just beginning.